Hello folks, welcome to the first in this series of how we can build a PHP/database project for Computer Science Advanced Higher. In this first video, we're going to look at setting up the environment, so setting up our XAMPP program, setting up a very small database, and then setting up a single PHP file to connect to that database and pull a piece of information. This series is going to be targeted towards the Qualification Scotland specification for Advanced Higher in terms of the PHP that you're expected to know. This isn't necessarily the best way to do PHP or the object-oriented way to do PHP. This is procedural, and this is the way that the Qualification Scotland board prefer that you do this for your Advanced Higher project. So if you're watching this video for anything other than Advanced Higher qualification for computer science in Scotland, then I would probably recommend using other videos. These series are going to be targeted towards doing what is required for the Advanced Higher computer science for Qualification Scotland. So with that out of the way, let's make a start. So there might be different software that you use at your school. We use XAMPP, so you would just go to the browser and search XAMPP and then find the first link and go ahead and download and install this for Windows. If you're on Linux, download it for Linux. If you're on OS X and you have a MacBook or Mac desktop, then use OS X. But you're going to download that and install it. It may come up asking for some privileges, which I would always recommend run XAMPP in administrator mode. So once you've got that downloaded and installed, I'm going to go ahead and run this. So if I just search in my start menu for XAMPP, you can see here I can click it once, it'll open, but I would prefer that we run it as administrator, just so we have every kind of possible issue sorted with regards to the modules running. I know sometimes they don't like to run or get rejected. So if you are for the first time seeing this screen here, you'll see that they may be X's under the modules here. I just have them properly installed, but you don't have to. You can just go ahead and start both of these if they aren't already started. So just make sure that the Apache module and the MySQL module are both started. They have their own PID and they have these ports set up. If they look different, I can't help you in these videos. That is another problem with your machine and your configuration and your setup. But if they are both running on those ports, we can go to the browser and type in localhost. Alternatively, in the XAMPP window, you can hit admin here on the Apache module, and this is what you'll see in front of you. You should see XAMPP Apache plus MariaDB plus PHP plus Perl. And then if we wanted to go into the MySQL or the PHP MyAdmin, you can click the link up here, and that should then take you to the PHP MyAdmin. Or you could click on the admin down here. It should bring you to the PHP MyAdmin on localhost. So here, there will be a bunch of databases or options here already for you. Game collecting is one I've made in the past for a previous project, but you'll have information schema, MySQL, performance schema, PHP MyAdmin, and test. I do believe test is there by default. I hadn't made that. But what we are going to be doing, so we go back to home, you're going to be making your own database. This database can have many tables, and if you are looking to do website major and database minor, which this series is going to focus on, mainly to get the most out of PHP for this video tutorial series, then you will be doing a single table database at minimum. You can have more than one table if you want to. I think a lot of the times students come up with ideas that is requiring more than one table, but at minimum, according to the QS specification, you need a connection to at least one table in your database. So at this stage, you probably or already have an idea of what your project is to do. The example I have here for this game collecting one, it's not fully built yet, but you can see I've got a users table, which obviously at the moment just has one user in it, just for testing purposes. It has a table that contains users' games. So if the idea is that the users can add games to their collection. And in this example here, we have a unique ID for this particular table, but then we have a column for user ID and a column for game ID. So what will happen here is if the user is signed in with the user ID of 1, and we go and run through this table and say there was 1,000 records in this table and user ID 1 appears 10 times, every time that appears, we then grab the game ID and use that to cross-reference in this table and say that, well, game ID 1 is 007 Everything or Nothing on the original Xbox, and that is in the user's collection, and we would use that to display the information about the game on the website, and they can continue to add games to their collection however they see fit. They could search for it via title, and when they add that to their collection, it just takes the ID, goes into user's game, inserts a new record, so the next ID would be 2, the user ID would be 1, and the game ID would be whatever game they picked. So if it was, for example, if we just did 2006 FIFA World Cup, the game ID is 6, so in user games it'd be 2, 1, 6. So every time there's a 1, we pull the game ID. Now, that was a really long-winded way of saying the minimum of one table is there as a minimum, exactly as the name suggests. You don't have to do one table. If your idea or project makes use of a single table, that's absolutely fine. But if your idea then needs to make use of other tables or multiple tables, again, that's fine as well. It just means you have a bit more work to do. So once you've got that downloaded and installed, again, you should see localhost, PHP MyAdmin. You should be able to visit these, no problem. Where you're going to actually make your or start writing your files and saving is to the C drive. So on your computer, go to your local disk C drive, and in there should be a folder called XAMPP, and you should see there's a bunch of files in here that you don't need to worry about. The main thing is we go into htdocs, and then in here I would recommend making a new folder and then just labeling it whatever your project is. So here I'm just going to label it project, and you can see it's there. In this folder is where my PHP files, my HTML files, any CSS files, JavaScript files, whatever files you want as part of the website will need to go in this folder. So if we have a look in game_collection, which is the idea behind this game collecting database, I've got an index page, login page, logout page, search page, and a user check file or PHP page, and then a styles.css. So in this project folder is exactly where you're going to place these files. Now you could just right click, new, and then do a text document, and then we could just call this index.php and remove the .txt from the end and enter, and then just hit yes. And then you can just take that, open up Notepad++, and let's just drag that in. Obviously it's a completely empty file. So on our index page, so this is the home page that the user will visit, you would probably want a kind of introduction as to what the website is about, or just some generic information. And if you're planning on having a login system to your website, which we'll go through at some point, then you don't want too much of the website being shown, because it's probably content that is related to the user's profile. So this index page really ought to be just a kind of home page that has maybe the navigation bar at the top, your logo and the title of your website and project, and then there'll probably be a couple of buttons where the user can click to register or they can click to log in. But before we do that, we need to actually write some code that connects to the database. Now at the moment we don't actually have a database set up, so if I go into PHP MyAdmin, if you click on new, we can then set up a new database. So a quick idea of, like, we could have users sign in and they can just create notes, and the website stores their notes. So I'll just call it note site. I'll go for an underscore, and then once you've got your database's name, hit create. And then next, because there's no tables, it's going to ask us to create a table. So the first table I want is users, and then the number of columns. This is where you could obviously increase or decrease them, but I'm going to have ID as one column, the username, the password, and their email address as 1, 2, and 3 columns. So yeah, 4 columns. Let's go with that. The first one, so the name of your column here is put into these boxes. The type, I'm going to leave it as an integer because I want it to be an auto incrementing number. So the idea here is this ID is our primary key, which means if we have users register, they will get a unique ID for their user ID, which means we can't have users with the same ID, and then that obviously prevents issues of users signing in and seeing their particular notes. So this A_I is auto increment. Make sure that's ticked for our ID column, and then we can just go ahead and put in things like username, password, and then email. We don't technically need email, but obviously the idea is if someone's signing up to a website and making an account, you would have an email that they can then use to confirm and create their account with. So it's a good idea to have. Now the usernames aren't going to be ints. I'm just going to set these to just text because that's all we're storing. We will do some prepared statements, which for kind of like future reference just means we can't have people doing SQL injection or not as easily. So I'll just leave it as plain text for now and then just go ahead and hit save. And then let's go ahead and insert a new table. And the table name for this one is going to be called notes. And in here, again, we have an ID. We must have an auto incrementing ID. We'll do user underscore ID. We'll have content for the note and then date created for obviously the date that the note is created. So under content, we want text. Under user ID, we want int, ID int, date created. We can set that to a date type. Again, auto increment ticked for our ID column, and then go ahead and hit save. So we've got notes and we've got users. So at this stage, we have no content in either of those. So I think it's a good idea. Let's go ahead and insert a standard user. So let's go to insert. ID here, value, you can leave that nothing because it's auto increment, which means it automatically defines the value for that. Username, I'm just going to choose admin. We're going to set that password to password, which is obviously a bad password, but it doesn't really matter for this is an offline website. Obviously, we would encourage stronger passwords than password on our sign up form. And also at some point we'll be doing some password hashing, which means we can encrypt this password so it's not stored in plain text as literal password. But just for the sake of getting this set up and running, let's go ahead and hit go on that. It should say a little tick emoji, one row inserted row ID 1. So now if we go into users and we hit browse, we can see there we've got ID 1, the username admin, the password, and the email has been set. If we don't have, so just one thing to note, if we go to structure, and if we don't have our ID as a primary key with the auto increment feature on, it means we don't have the ability to edit or delete any records in our database from this view. We'd probably have to do it via SQL, but here we're allowed to edit. So I could change the admin, I can change the password here and just hit go and that'll change it. If you don't have a primary key set up, you won't be able to do this. So we've got users, we've got our database, we've got our tables. Let's go ahead and write some PHP code so that we can connect to this table, this database, and go from there. So starting with PHP, we open up a bracket like we would do in HTML, pretty straightforward, and then we would include a question mark and then type PHP. Immediately, I will recommend that you close this tag, which is another question mark followed by a closed bracket there. Again, we don't need indentation, particularly unless we come to, well, we don't really need an indentation tool, but it's good for our visual understanding and reading of code. So I always recommend doing indentations. So the first thing we need to do is set up a connection to the database. The connection to the database requires 4 pieces of information. We need the server name, we need the username, the password, and then a database name. Now in XAMPP, because you're running it locally on your machine, these are always going to be the same thing. So server name equals, and then in quotes, it's just simply localhost, because that's the name of our server because we're running it locally on our machine. Then we need the username. We don't need these in this exact order, but This is just the order that it's done. And the username for this is root. And you can find this information out actually if we go back to PHP admin, go to the home page. You can see here the server's running on 127.0.0.1, and that's just local. And we can see the user is root at localhost. So our username is root. Our server name is localhost. So we can add that in. So localhost, username root. Next, we want the password. And that's just blank. We don't have a password for our database. And then now this is where something unique and custom does come in, and that's the name of our database that we set up. So this is our server, and here our database is. Note_site is our new database, so note_site. And there we have the variable set up, ready to form a connection to the database and check that it actually connects and we are allowed in with this username and password. So next thing we need to do is create a connection to the database, or create a connection variable. So variables in PHP, if you haven't already learned at this stage, $, and then any name you want, any word you want for the variable. So it's mysqli_connect. You'll see in Notepad++, that's why I recommend this program to beginners and anyone really that's writing code. When you start typing, and obviously based on our file type.php, Notepad++ has already picked up that our language is PHP. And in that case, it can start recommending some built-in functions as we're typing. So mysqli_ brings up a load of different functions. You can see if I scroll up and down, you've got loads. As soon as you start typing con, it's then going to think, okay, well, we've got connect error, number, and then connect error. So if we can just continue typing, or you can just tab and that'll fill it in for you. Open and close brackets, semicolon at the end, and in here we need to pass in the variables that we created. And the order of these variables is important. We need server name, username, password, then database. So basically the same order that we've written them here. So just go ahead, server name, and then again in in Notepad++, as we start typing, if something already exists in code, like $server name, you can see it's kind of preemptively written it here. Again, you can just press tab and it'll do it for you. And then another feature of Notepad++ that didn't come up originally is it's telling us our parameters that we should be passing in. So we've got the host, which was our server host. We just typed in that. Next, it wants username, so $username. Next is $password. And then finally, it wants the database name, so $database. So once we've given those variables to this mysqli connect function, it will then put that into our variable $con, and we can then check to see if that database or the connection to the database is successful. So to do that, we are going to introduce an if statement. So if, open and close brackets, and then again, as good practice, I like to open and close the brackets where our condition goes in, and then immediately open and close the curly brackets, which is obviously the code that we want to execute if that if statement is true, goes between these. So again, I just like to open and close them so I don't forget, and then I can go back and put in my condition. So if mysqli_connect, and then we want error, no. If that returns a value, if that returns true, then we are going to echo a message, and again, open and close the inverted commas, semicolon at the end, and then we can go ahead and put the message in. So failed to connect to my SQL, just a message. And then what we can do here is concatenate the actual error itself, which is mysqli_connect error. Open and close brackets because it's a function, and that just concatenates to this message what the error is. If we do get an error, so if this is true and we fail to connect, we then need to just kind of kill the connection. We can do that a couple of ways. We can do die, or you can do exit. Right, let's give this a save, and then we can't just go ahead and view current file in Chrome or Firefox and run the file like this. Instead, what we need to do is go to our browser, we type in localhost, and then we type /, and then it's going to be the name of the folder where this file is. So at the moment it's project, so / project, and then / the name of the file. The name of the file we made was index.php, so index.php. And then we get an error. So we've got an error on line 9 saying undefined constant MySQL connect error. No. Let's go back to that line 9. So it doesn't like that for whatever reason. Oh, because we didn't do an open and close brackets because it's a function. So we go back. And then what you can do from here is just go ahead to the URL and hit enter. And now, because it has a successful connection to the database, so let's just do an else on this. Else echo connection to MySQL successful. Go ahead and hit save. Let's go back. Reload that PHP file, and it says connection to MySQL successful. So what we've managed to do is connect to our PHP MyAdmin and the server. We've then also been able to connect to the database itself. So that is connecting to a database, setting it up. Next video, so this one was already quite long as it is. Next video, we'll look at grabbing some of that information from the database and displaying it.